I received some questions on Instagram about cluster sets. So for those who don't know what cluster sets are, basically just think about a traditional set of say 6 reps and you break it up into subsets, so clusters. So instead of performing 6 straight reps, you just break it up into 3 sets of 2 with a really short break between those sets of 2. There's obviously other ways to break up the clusters, but that's one example. So the purpose of doing clusters is to accrue a higher number of quality reps compared to traditional sets. Cluster sets typically lower the RPE over the course of all of the reps done compared to traditional sets. And so a question I was asked regarding cluster sets is, can they improve strength endurance or power endurance? And the short answer to that is no. I've done a video in the past talking about how strength endurance is a meaningless term. Strength and endurance are 2 different qualities, and you can't just combine the 2 to come up with its own quality. But addressing this question as it's asked, training via cluster sets, you can probably train at a given load for a longer period of time because the work is distributed over longer cumulative work periods with intermittent recovery periods. But cluster sets don't challenge your ability to endure higher outputs under fatigue in the same way a traditional set would. Cluster sets are meant to reduce the fatigue to ensure higher quality of work. So in that sense, cluster sets are actually antithetical to strength endurance. So then the other question I was asked about cluster sets, is it worthwhile doing them for things like curls, triceps extensions, or other exercises outside of your main barbell lifts? And my answer to that is that you could, but I probably wouldn't prescribe it for anybody. I think for those type of exercises, you're probably better off doing something like myo reps or rest pause sets if you want to get away from the traditional sets and reps. Exercises that are most conducive to cluster sets are your main barbell lifts and the Olympic lifts. And for rep ranges, I definitely wouldn't cluster more than 5 reps together. And usually I would just keep it between 1 and 3 reps per cluster. The purpose of cluster sets is that the reps should be of high quality, good bar speed, good bar path, and high intent. The more reps you do per cluster, the less it becomes a cluster and more like a traditional set. If you end up grinding out reps, the cluster sets lose its effectiveness and value. And the last point I want to make here is that the research regarding cluster sets is pretty favorable over traditional sets for like an 8 to 12 week period. But don't fall for the trap that just because the research says that it's more favorable for strength gain over a short-term period, that you should always have it into your training. It should be something that should be swapped in and out with traditional sets because long-term development is more important than short-term development.